Hello, hello, hello. Sorry for our tardiness, or my tardiness. My speaker just decided not to work, and that's not very helpful, as you can imagine. So I'm back on my computer speaker today. It's been on my computer speaker for the last however many years, so it should be fine. Welcome to this podcast on a nice grey Tuesday afternoon now. Yes, 12 o'clock. Some of us are in England, some of us are in Portugal, probably having better weather than us.
Afraid so.
The main thing is you can't really tell that in your background. So
no, I could just be really horrible and poke my camera out the window and show everyone, but I won't.
Yeah, thanks. We would appreciate that very, very much. We've had so much crap weather here the last couple of weeks, to be fair. But it is trying to make an appearance. Obviously we'll get started shortly. Just want time for people to join. If you are here already, please just say hi in the comments. It's nice to know that we're speaking to somebody. If you have any questions for Bobbi, then please do ask her or put something in the comments, and I will ask her, and we'll try to get to those if we can. I'm not very good, and I'll put a warning here, not very good at being able to read and talk and ask questions and listen. So I will do my best without it being just kind of rubbish. But we'll get started. So first off, I have to say thank you, Bobbi, for joining me today. I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have to share. I know that you're a bit of an expert in understanding how to create good strategies that make value for people. Kind of said that kind of wrong, but good at understanding how strategies should be and how make sure they're effective for the people that they're created for. It's probably the best way to explain that in a better way. As you can tell, this is not scripted at all. I just talk. But yeah, no, really looking forward to this. But before we get started, let's do some introductions. I'll quickly get mine out of the way, and then we can get to you, and it's then all about you. So for people who don't know who I am the founder of Employees Health. I'm a high-performance coach helping leaders and managers and employees perform at their best and thrive in their personal and professional life. So I help them with any challenges they have to make sure that they succeed, and that's it, right? We have a lot of different services, coaching packages that can help support a company and an individual do that, basically. So that's me. If you want to find out a bit more about my coaching and the leadership stuff or the wellbeing stuff, then please just give me a shout, and we can book in a call. Bobbi, your turn. I won't butcher your introduction like I do mine.
I'll try not to butcher it as well.
And instead, I'll let you do the talking.
Sure. So my name's Bobbi Hartshorne. I am the founder and chief wellbeing officer at a boutique consultancy company called Wellwise. And we really grew out of a couple of observations. The first was that we could see many, many companies spending increasing investment on workplace wellbeing initiatives and projects and various different things, but simultaneously the health and wellbeing of the working population was going down. So that was just a really interesting phenomenon where we were seeing interest and investment increase in this area, but somehow we weren't driving the results that people were looking for. And so that was something that was really interesting to me and my business partner, Tim. And the other one was that historically I'd worked in student wellbeing, so wellbeing for university students and people entering into the workforce. And it was becoming very obvious that the younger people entering the workforce were going to have different needs and expectations around health, wellbeing, engagement, these types of big topics. So having worked with them in the university space and then watching them enter the workforce and knowing that this was going to be potentially quite challenging for organizations to manage and understand, and to get the most out of those people. So we've essentially, we're big into the diagnostic side, the data side, the insights, and then using that story and that information to help us to frame strategies that are uniquely tailored to a particular organization, that track the things that matter to them, that are measurable, and that can generally show improvement and ROI and VOI for the organization as well. So yeah, our sweet spot is where people meet business, and how do we get those two things working really well together from a healthy perspective, and then how does that yield high levels of performance, high outcomes for the organization and the people as well.
Perfect. And this is why I'm looking forward to having this conversation. My first question for you is a bit of a broad question, but I think leads really nicely into our conversation. And I think it's a great way to start when we look at someone like yourself who works with strategy and well-being at work. So what does well-being at work mean to you?
That's a great question, and it's also a really good starting point. I agree. I think probably it's as easy to answer that as what it isn't, as what it is. So I'll do a bit of both. And I think one of the big problems that we have with this space is that what it isn't is often what people think it is. So lots and lots of conversation has happened around this space, around nutrition and financial well-being and health and all of these good things. And they definitely form part of it. And it's really important that we help our employees to have these healthy lifestyles so that they can turn up and be the best versions of themselves and work. But a lot of what we do is take that whole thing much further. So yes, we try and understand what's happening from an individual perspective, but really for me, workplace well-being is that interconnection between a business and its performance and success and longevity and sustainability, as well as the people and the people that work in that organization. How do we get the highest performance, sustainability, and well-being amongst them? And how do those two things happen together? At what point do we make compromises? When is that acceptable, not acceptable? How do we understand how maybe our cultures, our structures, our behaviors in an organization may actually be working against our well-being intentions and our performance intentions? And so we're really trying to get much deeper into that space. And yes, there is always an element of health and nutrition and exercise and sport and all those things that we often talk about in this space. But for me, the real nuance of workplace well-being is how do people and businesses connect to create thriving success for everybody, basically. And that's really where we focus. And I think that historically, the sort of connecting piece, the causation piece, and the relational piece between those two assets has been missing a little bit. And it's been a lot about just how can organizations help people with their own personal well-being and eat better, sleep better, and all those. And there's nothing wrong with that. But what it doesn't do is optimize the relationship between a business and its people, and optimize the energy that those two things can give to one another, and therefore create optimization. And so that's really where I think we need to be moving this discussion towards, so that we can get more sophisticated in our solutions and our understanding.
Yeah, I love that. I think I always have this conversation with my friend Jake, and I think he's like the person who shouts about this most, is that there's three elements to well-being when it comes to well-being and well-being at work. Is that organization and team, and then there's the individual. And I think that well-being at work, or workplace well-being, is the two first bits: the organization and how the team kind of adds to, or how they are run, and what their processes are to performance and success, which has to then collaborate with the individual, making sure that they're doing their own things for personal well-being and supporting that, as well as how they're then managing that person for performance and success as well.
Exactly. And that's also, I think, something that's been really missing, Richard, is that because we've been historically more dominated around things like smoking cessation programs or nutrition programs or sleep therapy or psychology or whatever, or the other sort of more, I guess, the words and the features that you might be more familiar with in this space, a lot of that was never measured. We just did things to help our employees, gave them programs, gave them access to support, blah, blah, blah. And we did it because it was the right thing to do, because we knew these were problems in our businesses, but it was very piecemeal. It was very engage if you want to engage, don't if you don't want to, all optional, all very nice, but not very well measured. And so another piece I think that's evolved in the workplace space over the past couple of years is really around this measurement piece. And how do we actually demonstrate and prove to an organization, its people, its board of directors, and the public, its customers, that we as an organization are thriving, that we're doing well, that our business is successful, that we can actually show return on investment, value on investment, added value to our customers, and all of that. So starting to bring that well-being conversation into the strategic discussions within a business and away from this kind of add-on tangential, we do it because we probably should and everyone's chatting about it at Deloitte and so maybe we should copy, but actually doing it as a meaningful strategic imperative within a business and actually using it to drive business success and outcomes as well as human success and outcomes. So for me, it's that rigorous measurement and that alignment to those, to saying, why are we bothering investing in this? What are we actually trying to achieve? And then proving whether or not we're actually achieving that thing or not. And if we're not, either letting it go or changing it rather than just keep doing it because that's what we've always been doing. So I think there's fundamentally a maturity happening in this space that's really been emerging in the last 12 to 18 months that is taking it quite significantly further in terms of its maturity and sophistication, which is super exciting.
Yeah, I think it's really important that we understand as you said, the numbers and the statistics behind it, because it's easy to do things, and I think this is where, especially in the UK, and I know you've been mainly focused in the UAE market. In the UK, I think we've gone through a cycle of we did loads of bits. And then we found that actually the bits we've done maybe haven't really worked, and or we haven't been measuring it, and we haven't been able to see the impact on it, so we don't really know if it's worked.
Yeah, and then we're scared to take it away because it could be working, but we're not checking, or it isn't working, but we've given it now. So how do we now tell our employees this thing that you've had isn't now available? And that we're kind of unraveling the ball of string a little bit as to like, where are we again with this? Like it's moved on so far since COVID that I don't blame organizations. There is an overwhelming wealth of information available, but you have to have somebody who can sift through it, who can understand it, who can apply it strategically in your business, who can get buy-in from other people in your business. That is no mean feat. It's all well and good, the internet being full of useful articles, but if somebody can't actually mobilize it, it's a pointless enterprise. So I think that's where a lot of organizations have got to, is that they're sort of sitting on this cusp of like, right, well, we've done some stuff, but we don't really think it's working. We're spending quite a lot of money. We know the whole market has matured, but we don't really know where we fit in that. And we don't really know how to take advantage of that maturity. And we don't really know what we should be spending and what we should be expecting as a return. Should we even get a return? Is this a cost or an investment? And so all these conversations are going around in businesses, but the reality is that most businesses don't have the know-how inside them to actually answer the questions or give anybody any kind of insight that would help them to clarify that. And we sort of, and people like yourself and the work we do, we try and help organizations understand this better and fill those gaps and actually get to something that regularly they can say, we're investing this and it's returning this. Yeah. And that's quite exciting as a space to be in, because it also allows us to better understand causality. So we very, very quickly say, oh, our employees don't sleep properly and our employees always eat too many McDonald's and don't go to the gym and they're very lazy and blah, blah, blah. And we like to say that all the reasons that employees behave like that is for reasons outside of the workplace. But the reality is that a huge number of the reasons why people behave like that and do those things and is actually happening to them inside the workplace, in their relationships with other people and the type of people they hang out with and the type of stress that they face and how how they deal with reward and recognition, and all of those things are definitely contributed to within the workplace. And for a very long time, we've been neglecting that relationship and just hoping that it's an outside workplace issue that we can just support with. And it's now becoming abundantly clear that a lot of the problems that our employees face and the cost that then we accrue as businesses is actually coming from inside the workplace. And so now we're starting to have that open and somewhat frank and uncomfortable conversation sometimes, but at least we're having it. At least we're starting to rip the plaster off and go, okay, we've got this wound now, let's actually treat it properly. And that's quite exciting and interesting to be in. And yeah, we hope to be able to give and provide some significantly more robust data and insights than maybe organizations have historically been able to get their hands on. And so, hopefully that means that we can curate better quality and more strategic and more unique solutions that are designed specifically for that particular organization.
Yeah, and I think that leads back to that point of that piece of research that come out saying the wellbeing initiatives weren't working. It was the fact that they didn't look at the internal processes or the way the workplace had set itself out to support its employees, because that's the first thing we need to look at, right? And then we can begin to add the supports and the initiatives to then bolster and
Precisely.
to improve that strategy, right?
Exactly. And it's a little bit like the phrase charity starts at home. It's like wellbeing starts in the workplace. So if we can understand that, and we can get our heads around this idea that it shouldn't be, more importantly, but it certainly doesn't have to be purely a outsourced purchase type strategy where you just go, okay, we've got some smokers, we've got some people who need to lose some weight, we've got some people who sleep at their desk, we've got some people who are disengaged, blah, blah, and we're going to piecemeal some off-the-shelf solutions to deal with them and then hope that they take advantage of those things, which has historically been a lot of what's gone on, unfortunately. And when you say it out loud, it sounds ridiculous, but it's very, very hard for companies to realize that that's what they've been doing. And you have to
learn somehow, right?
To them a little bit. Say that again.
You have to learn somehow as well. Like we all make
precisely trial and error. Yeah.
Like we did that, and maybe we weren't really looking at it in full. When we had COVID, we were like, look, we want to support, we want to talk about mental health, we want to do these bits. People are at home. Here you are. Here's some education. Here's some knowledge. This is the way we can support you. And so yeah, you have to try these different things. But then as we begin to learn more, and companies begin to learn more, and the people who are also supporting begin to learn more because they're getting a bit more involved. Because obviously the space has grown massively. Then you begin to go, okay, actually, the biggest issue is the workplace, and actually internally, a lot of processes need to be changed, and that then has to put a little bit more ownership on the company. And I think that's
exactly. And the nice thing about that is that it doesn't feel like it's been thrown into this extra space in our business that we call well-being, that we've never really been able to kind of wrap our hands around, and we've never really fully understood whose responsibility any of that is, and we've not really understood why we're doing it and whether we're actually achieving anything by doing it. But the good news was that the will is there, the interest is there, and there is a direct understanding of, if I have a happy, healthy workforce, I should have a stronger business. That connect exists for most people. How to get a happy, healthy workforce, how to make your organization and its people operate in tandem and unison towards the same higher order goals. That's the tricky part. The how is the tricky part. And I think that the how until now hasn't been particularly effective. And we're starting to realize that we actually can just make small adjustments inside businesses. We can identify cultural risk. We can identify managerial and leadership risk. We can identify over bureaucratic businesses are really wearing people down now, spending too much time filling out pieces of paper and not actually adding any value, and then getting very bored with that. So you can start to find these places that historically people wouldn't have called well-being. when you fully understand how a person thrives in their work, how a person turns up and gives their all, how they get their kicks out of being at work, and work should be a driver of well-being if it's done well. Once you've got people on that page and they're so engaged in driving towards these common goals, and they have the psychological safety to say that's going in the opposite direction, that's unhelpful, that is a waste of our time and money, and they're actually able to criticize and critique in a safe environment, the world's your oyster then. And whilst we call it well-being and we call it workplace well-being and culture and all those things, it's actually just running a really successful business and getting people to do great work for you. And if we've called that well-being because that's how the people like us understand it, that's fine. But for people who don't necessarily understand this word well-being, it's much bigger, it's much more holistic than maybe historically people have understood. And then when you add the layer of the workplace context on top of that, the opportunities to move well-being up a little notch by just doing very, very small, sometimes very low cost, even free things, but just a slight tweak here and a pull this lever here and a nudge that one out the way a little bit. And you can actually have a profoundly quick and quite significant increase. But you do have to sustain it. You can't, we're going to token ingest it for a month and then we're all going to go back to our old ways of working, and all the stresses come back. So what I'm trying to say as a sort of message to anybody listening to this is, don't fear well-being as this kind of unknown space where you might get yourself into hot water. Just think of it as running a really efficient business with great people doing great work for you. And how do you make that happen? And that fundamentally is what we're about. And I think it's really changing the language and the positioning of well-being in the workplace that's happened so recently, certainly post-COVID, but maybe even arguably more recently than that, as we learned a year after COVID what's been going wrong or right, and now we're in the continuous improvement phase and we're ramping it up again to the next level of maturity. So yes, it's cool. It's a really cool space, and it's one that I just don't understand why any leader wouldn't want to have some idea of what's going on in this space, because it's just so profound. It's just such a game changer for business, and I've got flies everywhere. Look, such a game changer for business, and I hope that means that things are going to be better for business, easier for business leaders, and better for people working in businesses as we get more sophisticated in this space.
Yeah, I think, and you make it sound so simple, right? Like you create an organization where everybody can succeed. That's that. I mean, ultimately, if you're creating a startup business, that's your ultimate goal. Mm-hmm. But actually, I feel like it's actually a lot harder than just. It's simple changes, but like for some people, that's quite a challenge, right? And some of the processes and some of the characters and personalities and views and values are all unique to themselves. And when you're in an organization which has got a set culture and a set way of doing things, these simple tweaks, which I completely agree, some of them are really simple to say and to say out loud, can be really hard for organizations to really buy, or people, not even organizations, people within those organizations to go, actually need to make this change. Yeah. How am I going to lead? How I'm going to do this, because as you said, like the workplace well-being for the most part comes from the organization and the team leaders and teams, so people involved in those, but the individuals create their own well-being if they're allowed to. So I'm just going to move us on to kind of how do we make sure, how do we know that we are on the right path or we're doing the right things? What's that?
So look, it's the scientist in me says we can do it by numbers, and 100% you can do some of this by numbers. You can be tracking all sorts of metrics that you may or may not have realized relate to this. So for instance, everybody tracks engagement. Well, engagement is a product of well-being, and well-being is a product of engagement. So those two things are interchangeable or highly correlated. You've got then more business level metrics, so things like absenteeism rates, staff turnover rates, speed to hire, amount of sick leave, private medical insurance usage, loss ratios. There are a multitude of financial indicators and business metrics that should be changing for the positive if you are getting this right. So they're the kind of business metrics that we use, and we would create a benchmark of those. Where are we today? Then we do our well-being diagnostic, and then we do a strategy, and then we look at those benchmarks again after a period of time and see whether our strategy is moving the needle on those points. You've also got the science, the numbers around individuals. So, how much sleep are people getting? What are they eating? How often are they exercising? All of those things are useful metrics because they give you an idea of behaviors and where people maybe need educating and supporting. But, and that's great to be able to have hard numbers to stick to, or to use to inform you. But they come with two caveats. One is that you could be making other changes in your business simultaneously that have a positive or negative impact on that particular feature, that's either knocking out or adding to the value that your uplifting well-being is given. So it's never a pure science. You can say, good, right, we did this initiative and we've spent this money and we're seeing positive returns here, but you often can't attribute the entirety of the positive return to well-being, but certainly some of it. And then the other one is, I suppose, the not scientist in me goes, and you can just feel it. Mm-hmm. It's like a sense, it's like a calmness, the fractiousness or the tension is positive, it's energetic, it's passionate, as opposed to stressed and freaking out and overwhelmed and arguments in the office and unable to make decisions and unable to come up with ideas. It feels like it's, I want to say the word loose. It feels like it's not an uphill struggle all the time to get the barest minimum achieved. People come to work and they feel or sound more sprightly. They're clearer, they're getting more out of it than they were, so they're prepared to put more into it, and that sort of psychology changes. So I think it's absolutely vital that we get much, much better at the science and the maths and the data insights piece to be able to help us to understand where we are, understand our biggest pain points, and work out a strategy for addressing those, and then checking if our strategies worked. That has to start happening in a more robust way if we are to continuously improve and have greater impact with the money we're spending from well-being. But don't dismiss just walking into the office and going, it just feels better. It just feels happier. It feels lighter. People look healthier. There's less arguments. We're dealing with less noise and negativity. And that is a product of it. That's how you can tell if it's there or if it's starting to change.
So, I mean, I really like that view. The data's and the sciencey bit of understanding this. How and then I love the psychological feel part. It is like our brains, right? The emotional and then the logical. How do you measure that emotional part? Like, how have you got any recommendations in where you can go, okay, well, because ultimately companies want to see that improvement, even if you can't give it a number, like a value to that straight away. You might be able to, because of the back end of numbers. But is there a way that you can recommend?
So we include a lot of that stuff in our diagnosis. So we're asking people like their satisfaction levels with certain things in a business. We ask them questions that don't necessarily, the person answering it won't necessarily realize that when we ask them that, we're actually testing for something else. So we ask engagement questions in a slightly backhanded way so that they, you know, they're indicators of engagement as opposed to somebody saying, are you engaged at work? Rather than, no, we need to talk about what does that look like. So we do regularly ask for that. You are getting subjective responses there though, right? You're getting what people feel and perceive as opposed to any kind of objective, accurate. It's accurate that they feel that way. It's not accurate that it is that way, if that makes sense. So you can measure those things and you can get a litmus test, but you should also see it turning up in fewer sick days, fewer random days off, fewer conflicts, fewer less staff turnover, or maybe not so much less, but more the right type of staff turnover. Because what these changes do, Richard, and this is something to be aware of, is they do change your business, right? And they might change the culture a bit in your business, or maybe things that were historically accepted or acceptable now become unaccepted or unacceptable. And there will be some people who won't make that change. They can't. They just don't fit in your new model anymore. We see that sometimes with what we call toxic rock stars. So again, be careful just looking at your numbers, because you may well find that one of your measures is staff turnover. It's less about just are we down to, have we got 20% now instead of 25%, but rather who's gone, and are those people, was it okay that they went? You know, are they do we mind that much that those people went? Maybe it just isn't the right place for them. So sometimes you will find yourself in this change having to have that conversation with people, and that's another indicator that it's working, right? Because it doesn't fit anymore for some people. It is possible to measure it subjectively, to get people to answer questions about it, to get people to give you indicators. But also, I would just say sometimes not everything has to be measured to within an inch of its life, right? It can be alongside other measures. We don't need to know 100% about everything all the time, every moment. You know, we can just say we just feel like there's an uplift. But again, fundamentally, if you feel like there's an uplift, but none of your financial metrics are improving, right? Then it might feel right, but something's not clicking at the return on investment end of things. So then you have to go and know, well, why is that? Why are we still not improving that? Even though it just generally feels better, healthy, and blah, blah, blah. And how long does that take? And blah, blah. So this is why organizations hire data analysts and data people like us, because we look for and see stuff in data that on the headline you wouldn't necessarily see. Oh, we've only dropped 2% in annual employee turnover, and then we can go into it and look deeper into it, and that then tells you more of a story, because at the headline it doesn't look very impressive at all. So that's just a good illustration of going a bit beyond what the headlines tell you.
Yeah, I love that. It's a really clear way of understanding it as well. So obviously one of the reasons why I kind of got you on here is because of your approach to understanding this stuff and then doing your survey and kind of how you analyze businesses. So can you just give us some information and kind of help the listeners understand some of the key areas you look at when you are analyzing and what you think may be slightly different in the way you do it?
Sure. So basically, this all started with me being made redundant from my previous job and going on holiday during COVID and having a little bit of a epiphany kind of moment where I started to get really into reading and looking at existing research around workplace wellbeing. This was all 2020, so 4 years out now. So I basically spent a year deep diving into every bit of good quality research I could find in this space from all over the world, different industries, different general practices, etc. And also looked at existing models for assessing variety of different things. So, you have engagement surveys, you have resilience surveys, you have just general staff satisfaction surveys and all sorts of things, and even well-being surveys. And what I started to notice when I was looking at all of the existing models and all of the research is that a lot of the questions in the surveys that were being asked were good, but they were all being asked in isolation at different times, sometimes by different people. And so you would get the results from your engagement survey, say in March, and then you might go, oh, it's time for us to do our resilience survey. And you'd do that in like July. And then you go, oh, and now it's the end of year staff engagement survey, staff satisfaction survey, whatever it is. And we do that in November. And because they're all anonymous, you can't in any way identify trends across those things. Mm-hmm. So you can't see how engagement, satisfaction, well-being are all playing with each other because you're asking in isolation all the time. Mm-hmm. So what we started to say was, hang on a minute, there's two sides of this coin disc, and we literally draw it like a disc. Mm-hmm. On one side, you've got all the elements that make an employee have really high levels of well-being. So that is your basic health stuff that we've talked about already, but also things like a sense of accomplishment, being stretched and challenged, having clarity over my goals, having good relationships at work, how much time am I spending commuting, is that, what compromises is that making my household lifestyle, etc. So there's all the human people stuff that's like a little recipe for really thriving, high well-being person in a workplace. On the other side, there's all of the pieces of the puzzle that an organization has within their capability to either affect positive well-being change on a person or its workforce, or create negative well-being change on a person or its workforce. So we then essentially diagnose those things simultaneously. Mm-hmm. So that we can start to see whether there is correlation or causal relations between one factor or another. Do we, for instance, know that people who commute over an hour and a half a day have also commonly have issues with sleeping, smoking, or whatever else, or bad relationships with their manager? Or, do we see correlations in behaviors and patterns and stressors? Because only when we start to understand it holistically can we actually start to solve the causation rather than the problem. So the problem is, lots of conflict amongst our people, lots of arguments, not much innovation, low productivity. Why? We try and understand why at both the most human level of how a person lives and thrives and at an organizational level. And what levers can an organization pull, and to how far, in what direction can they affect positive change? And sometimes it can just be a little doink, and you go, oh my goodness, this make a huge change really fast. And other times it's like, no, this one has been, like you were saying earlier, cultural behaviors, attitudinal stuff, which has been buried in there, particularly for a long time. We call those our biggest barriers to success. If they're revealed as a big blocker to innovation, productivity, thriving, success, then we know you're not going to make one or two changes overnight and suddenly your problem has gone away. It's going to be like chipping and carving and sculpting something new over time and being far more sophisticated with that. And there will be in any organization a blend of those things, short, easy fix stuff and big, heavy things that, you decide you're going to start chipping away at. So it's that kind of more holistic view, that connective feel that we do, that hopefully doesn't just say what, but also starts to indicate as to why. Mm-hmm. And then actually directly point organizations to where they need to spend money and spend time. So we also break all of our data down by different demographic groups. So do we see, for instance, women struggling with certain things that are different to what men are struggling with? Is there age variances? Is there tenure variances? Is it to do with whether you've got children or not got children? So we can start to then say, well, we're also now not just trying to do one size fits all across, let's just provide every single wellbeing solution for every single member of our staff, knowing full well that that's only a tiny percentage of your staff that are struggling with that. So we don't need to buy 5,000 licenses. We need to buy 5 or 20 or 30 licenses and then, see how they get used up. So there's a more sophisticated kind of solution matching with real identified issues at a demographic level. And we also help the organizations to work out where they've maybe got higher levels of risk inside the business from a departmental level or a teams level or a divisional level, or maybe if they're multinational, a particular country or office might have much worse results or outcomes than, say, another office. So why is that? What's at play in that office that isn't at play elsewhere? And so again, don't try and create something for your entire international company. Just go to the place where we've identified high levels of risk and let's dig in there, because that's going to move the needle far quicker than a splattergun approach of just throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. So it becomes much more, I suppose, surgical.
Yeah.
Find risks, really unique risks. Who is it affecting? How much is it costing us? Or what is the risk that this places to us or an individual? And is it worth fixing? And if it is, what are we going in with our medication to address that issue? And becoming far more specific and sophisticated than historically. 30% of your population smoke, therefore you must need to buy the smoking cessation program, which was historically worked.
And you see
everybody now has access to a smoking cessation program, even though only 30% of our population actually smoke and only 5% of them are anywhere interested in quitting. So do you see what I mean? It's like it's so mad when we say how we've been doing it historically, but I can totally understand why we went on that journey. But I suppose my argument now is we shouldn't still be on that journey. We should be moving now we can to this more sophisticated. And very often, Rich, that doesn't mean spending more money.
It sounds like actually spending less.
Can either spend less or spend the same for a greater gain, right? Because you go, okay, we're wasting money over here. Let's divert that cash into this big risk area that we've just identified. We're going to do some more specific surgical work there and really get on top of that and know that we're not really losing anything by dropping this thing out of our subscription services or benefits or whatever else. We also point out things like, so for instance, we can show a departmental head who maybe has 6 or 7 teams underneath them, how each of those teams are doing. So do we have so recently 84% of managers came in a study, I think it was Deloitte, and said, might be McKinsey, who said, we know we're part of the problem. And we actually want to be part of the solution, but we don't know how. So the idea of that data is to be able to identify where you've got managers whose teams are really struggling. And so it could be about empowering the manager and educating the manager and getting hold of that one group of 10 people than trying to do that across the whole organization where it's not necessary. So it does that. We provide data at the individual level, at the team level, and at the organizational level. It's all anonymized, so there's no way that who said what, but you can certainly start to look in. The individual level stuff is only visible to the person who completed the survey, and then it gives them some. And then the other feature we've built into it, we've built in 2 other features into it, Rich, based on feedback from various people and users and HR employees and leaders. One was we've put a guidance framework on it. So every individual gets their personalized results, and it says, you would appear to be struggling with this, this, and this. Here's some guidance on those things. What does it mean? How does it relate to well-being? How does it relate to your work? Here's some tips. Here's some free resources. Oh, and did you know your organization offers counseling in this, or a free subscription to a gym, or whatever it is that they have in their benefits packages? That can then be shown there as well, so that the person gets on a journey, because engagement with this stuff is a really big issue. So if somebody learns this is a problem area for them, then they're presented immediately with some guidance information about this, and now they're being sent on a journey to how to deal with it, either with or without the support of the organization, depending on what's available there. So you're starting to empower each individual person with useful data and actionable insights and outcomes after that. And then similarly at the team level, you're telling team managers and leaders of a certain size group, because it has to be anonymized, what's happening at their collective level. So the 8 people in your group, you don't know what they're all facing individually, but you know that as a collective, they're weakest in this area, this area, and this area. And so you as a manager also have access to guidance, information, and resources for managers and leaders that's designed to basically help you get more engaged with this material, become more confident talking about well-being topics that historically were like, oh, mental health, and we don't go there, and I'm too scared of that. Suddenly we're actually talking about stuff that you do all the time, but just in a different context. So that's all there as well for them, which again, the whole point of this is to really embed well-being multiple levels in the business, not just have it coming from one department, choose it or don't choose it. Like if you think it's a strategic imperative, everybody has to be on the bandwagon, everybody has to be playing their part. Yeah. And so that's the sort of structure of the way we present the data is designed to start to facilitate that and get people into a place where without loads and loads of training and HR development work, they can actually have a reasonable conversation with a staff member or work on something with their team. You know, maybe their team just is lacking clarity. They don't know what they're supposed to be doing or why they're doing what they're doing or whatever. Well, there's a conversation starter in there for somebody to do that. And not even realizing that's a well-being issue, right? Most people just think that's a business conversation, and it's not, because when people lose that clarity, when they don't understand where their efforts are going, where they don't know how they're going to grow, that then starts to wear down on a person, and that then starts to destroy their well-being and compromise their well-being. And so you can fix a business problem and fix a well-being problem simultaneously. And I think that bringing people into that safe space of like realizing a lot of these topics aren't as scary as you thought they were or unfamiliar as you thought they were, that's really what we're trying to do.
I think that's a really good point you make there as well about like actually some of this is just business progression stuff, right? And business support. And this is where I do a lot of work with clients, is actually, it's really, you call it basic, simple bit, but by getting themselves in order, having a bit of a goal, having a bit of a vision, having some actions they can take to make sure they're managing their life, they thrive. And that's just business, right? It's business. You kind of maybe call that professional development or business coaching, then more so than well-being. But that makes a huge impact to somebody's ability to kind of look forward and thrive. And
exactly.
Motivated.
And it's contagious, right? Because what happens is we're seeing this a lot now, rightly or wrongly. A lot of well-being money in businesses is now being channeled to the C-suite and the senior leadership team, where burnout is rife, where they're losing very, very experienced talent, people are retiring early, all these kind of things. So there's a bit of a risk there from a senior talent perspective, which has meant a lot of money and investment has gone into the well-being of those people, which is great. One of the positive outcomes of that, and I wouldn't hang this as your entire strategy, but there's no doubt that a person who goes through that transformation themselves, who overcomes those challenges, who starts to see how those bureaucratic and political and cultural issues in the business are actually having a negative impact on them. Maybe they didn't notice it before, or this has now become more clear to them. They go through that journey and then they realize the power of it for them, and they soon realize, gosh, if we multiply this up for 50% of our workforce, for instance, and i.e. the number of people go through it and the people that actually have a positive reaction, it's profound. They're getting more clarity of thought, they're becoming more innovative, their ideas are better, they're faster making better quality decisions, they're easier to hang around with, they're more open to criticism and ideas and all of that. And suddenly they're like, hang on, we need this in our whole business, needs to have this is missing everywhere. And again, it's like, hang on, this is really blurring the lines between good business and well-being, and they are so connected. It's that this is what we're people like you, me, trying to educate people on, that they are two and the same thing. And if we get them right, they both thrive.
Yeah. And then I think people get, and then you add the well-being bits into it. Good sleep, good nutrition, exercise,
Exactly.
fresh air.
Exactly.
Whatever the well-being behaviors look like, you add that to how people perform, what people need to have in place from a kind of process standpoint.
Yeah.
You're on a win-win.
100%. It's just like turbocharging it. Yeah. And it's all cyclical, right? So if you remove a person's unnecessary stresses at work, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that workplaces should have zero stress, because some stress is good, right? There's positive stress and peak stress, and then there's boredom, and then there's chaos, and you need to be very sure you're not in either side of those. And actually a surprising number of people are in the boredom category. People don't realize, most people think businesses are super, super, super stressful and everyone's running around like headless chickens, but actually a very, very high proportion of disengaged people are bored, not over challenged. So there's acres of talent in your business right now waiting to be released, sitting there bored, going, please entertain me, please challenge me, please give me more things to contribute to and add value to. And they're already in your businesses, but you don't know who they are. Yeah. So that's sort of a piece that comes out in this as well. And I think there's just so much untapped potential here that if we can really help business leaders to understand what does get the most out of their employees beyond a paycheck, beyond a title. And I honestly, that stuff is less and less important now. Yeah, people need to put a roof over their heads and put the kids through school and all that stuff. But once that's covered, how else do you motivate them? How do you motivate people who've got a lifestyle that they already pretty comfortable with? And yeah, we're all ambitious and would like an extra holiday a year or an extra, whatever. How do you get people motivated? Well, you get people motivated because they're engaged, they're passionate, they're getting more out of this experience than collecting a paycheck at the end of the month.
And they're enjoying it, and they've got a vision.
Exactly.
They like going to work because the people there at work are fun.
Exactly. And guess what? Now people are fun. Should we go for a lunchtime run?
Yeah.
So we all bring in healthy lunch on Thursdays.
Yeah.
And suddenly you get community behaviors and volunteer type behaviors in which, can I be a mentor to younger people in our business? Because now I've got the energy. Before I was tired, miserable, disengaged, couldn't be bothered, bare minimum just to not get noticed and then sit and collect my paycheck and have a nice time every weekend. Life doesn't have to be that, right? And that's bad for business. And it's bad for people. People shouldn't be living for weekends. They should be getting enough out of their job that their job is a well-being contributor.
Yeah, 100%.
And if they are, the business is winning too, right?
Yeah.
And there's a whole science called social proximity. So basically, social proximity is you take on the behaviors of the people you are literally physically closest to. So if you hang out with people who all run and do yoga, the chances are you're going to start picking up running and yoga as your way of belonging to that group. It's just a whole level of psychology happening at a much deeper level. But if you are hanging out with people who are all smokers and you're not a smoker, you will become a smoker because you want to belong and go with them. So again, how much of your behaviors in your business are being driven by the social proximity effect, and how many of them are good contributing behaviors to the business and destructive behaviors to the business? And again, if we don't understand that, we can't empower the positive and shut down and eliminate the negative.
Yeah. That social psychology explains why so many people are running nowadays. I think when I look at Instagram, you just see everybody running. I'm just going to switch my Instagram off. I don't want to go running.
No, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And, building those things into work is really nice. Like super sociable, even if you go out for 20 minutes for a walk in the park around lunchtime instead of, some big physical 45-minute run. That isn't always for everybody. But just spending quality time with people, helping people to do fit their healthy lifestyle into those gaps in work where it fits is great, because that feeds the beast basically, and it builds trust and it builds relationships. So there's a lot going on that's cyclical, that's mutually beneficial, and that's I suppose creates what I would call compounding dividends.
Yeah, I love that. I get behind that. I'm not getting behind a run though.
I'm not a runner either. I'm like 2K and I'm done.
Bobbi, thank you ever so much. I would love to see this all played out, all on data sheets, and you selling that to people and actually seeing them kind of have that understanding. Because to me, I'm just like, oh, this is awesome. But I think it would make it interesting, kind of fly on the wall moment when you actually see those differences. And actually, if the whole of the cultures we're dealing with within these workplaces or within the UK saw it from that kind of perspective, I think we make a big difference. So I really appreciate you sharing all of that. I can't let you go without giving me your top 3 tips as takeaways from today.
Okay, so the first one I always try and go with is well-being is a multi-layered thing. So you have to be able to bring it into your business at an individual level, and at a team/departmental level, and at an organizational level. And it only works if it's penetrating in both directions, up and down and throughout your business. That's how you really get it to go. Mm-hmm. So it's no use just handing it to one department and making it optional. So that's the first. The second is, for people who historically hear the word well-being, workplace well-being, and either roll their eyes or melt into a corner in absolute panic that they're going to have to suddenly become a psychologist, I hope today has made you realize that actually that's not the case at all. And that just understanding what makes people tick and how to get the best from people and how to help people help your business. A lot of that is in the business space. Less obviously in the well-being space, but they're mutually beneficial. So I suppose it's kind of do away with your loaded connotation of what the word well-being or workplace well-being means, because it's so much broader than that, and actually so much more accessible than that. And the third one is measure from the start, whenever you're trying to put some money into something or change where the money's going or add some new money, don't miss out on collecting that benchmark. That's obviously something we can help you with. There's other options, but get your benchmark of measures and insights and information, and measure from there. Do stuff and then measure if it's working, because the downside when we're not measuring if it's working is that we're starting to get disengagement even from those people who were historically very pro and engaged with this, because they can see lots of positive intent happening, they can see money being spent, but they can't see it coming back. Either through better well-being, ironically, or even better business outcomes. And because of those two things are missing, I think people are getting a little bit like, what is this even all about? And so being able to measure, being able to stop things in their tracks if they're not having the ideal impact, and being able to demonstrate that value is actually being created. This is worthwhile investment, and we are making ROI, but also VOI, and talk about it all the time. Talk about, God, it feels better in here. It's lighter. People are happier. We've had some great innovations this week. Like, congratulate people, reward people, recognize those extra efforts that people go to, and keep the positive moving forward. It's not easy. It isn't. But it's a lot easier than running a business that has culturally died, basically, because that's just a never-ending uphill struggle that you will never get on top of until you do a serious intervention. So it's definitely work. There's definitely a bit of upfront cost, but the dividends it pays back outshine all of that 1,000 times over.
Yeah, wicked. No, I love that. I thought that was a very informed Yeah, very formative, informal conversation. Lots of information shared. I appreciate you giving me your time.
Absolute pleasure.
Doing all this stuff. You can find Bobbi on the link on her name if you're on LinkedIn. And I guess all your details about Wellwise, I don't want to call it a survey, but the survey,
the
diagnostic. There you go, the diagnostic on Wellwise. But if you want to find out a bit more about what she does, then find her on LinkedIn and drop her a line.
And then I was just going to say a little freebie for everybody at bewellwise.app/tools. So bewellwise.app/tools. There are currently 3 free tools that can be used by anybody. We've got a return on investment calculator to give you an indicator of what you should be expecting based on historic studies of those things. We've got an audit tool that shows you where your organization currently is against the 4 phases of wellbeing maturity and how to get up to the next one. And we've got a strategy checklist. So if you're writing a strategy, have we got all these features, or does our current strategy miss some of these things? So you can kind of identify your strategic gaps as well. And they're all completely free of charge, available on that bewellwise.app/tools.
I love that. Thank you. I think more of my podcast hosts should give away free tools. Yeah, no, love it. Thank you.
Awesome.
People here, I'm live next week with Sam Langford talking about trauma of work. That'd be a really interesting one as well. I hope everybody has a great day. Bobbi, stay where you are, and we will see people soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.